On my behalf, on behalf of my delegation, my congratulations to Mr. Korosi for his election to the 77th session of the General Assembly. I wish him every success in his term. I also thank Mr. Abdullah Shahid for his tireless work and the invaluable contribution he made during his presidency of the previous session of the General Assembly. I also would like to applaud the continuing efforts of Mr. Antonio Guterres, who leads our organization with wisdom and balance in these difficult circumstances around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, my country, Libya, which I have the honor of serving and representing, is going through a decade of both suffering and hope. Libya is still trying to build its state institutions and consolidate the principles of democracy. The Libyan people have demonstrated to the entire world that they represent a unified a unified nation. In spite of the challenges, the Libyan people, thanks to its clairvoyance, tolerance, and patriotism, continue to work for a united country. They give us the determination and hope to keep moving forward to realize their aspirations to build our state and pave the way for stability and prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, the events of today certainly recall the past. The Army of Libyan Liberation, which was created before the creation of the Libyan state, fought alongside the armies of the world, of the free world. After the defeat of fascism, Libya earned its independence. Our independence was born as a result of our national combat, and this made it possible for our founding fathers to build our country and to launch our trajectory of prosperity and development, which in a record time made Libya a model of development. Ladies and gentlemen, today, of course, the situation is very different. Individual interests of different countries involved in the Libyan situation, as well as proxy wars and diverging views on how to solve the situation in Libya, have not given us an opportunity to develop our own national path. The very negative international interventions offer contradictory solutions which push our country towards armed confrontation, which do not spare innocent people and which lead to intransigent political positions, which do not accept any concessions and any middle ground. Ladies and gentlemen, the Libyan Presidential Council is attached to its role as indicated in the Libyan political agreement. As the supreme political authority, this council represents national and international unity of the country and fulfills the function of the commander-in-chief of the army. It is also responsible for leading the efforts of national reconciliation that is inclusive to pave the way towards democratic and peaceful transition through parliamentary and presidential elections. At the same time, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the African Union for having cooperated with us in order to launch the project of national reconciliation. This project represents the most important pillar to support our trajectory that would lead to peace and stability they were hoping for. These responsibilities force us to work in the framework of an impartial and balanced national efforts. In spite of the attempts by certain political parties to push us towards political confrontation, that we are trying to avoid by every possible means. We are trying to resolve these political disputes. The Presidential Council has closely followed the series of dialogues between the Parliament and the Council of State. These rounds of dialogue have still not led to an agreement on the constitutional rules to be followed for the parliamentary and presidential elections. The Presidential Council continues to stress that these rounds of dialogue should not continue indefinitely. The Presidential Council is ready to intervene to have the political process, if necessary, to overcome the impasse in the political process, if necessary. At the economic level, the Presidential Council has supported all efforts that have made it possible to restore the production of gas and oil in all Libyan regions. This certainly is in line with the national interests and supports stability on international markets that have been under severe pressure, especially in countries that are major consumers of energy. Furthermore, based on our balanced position, the Libyan Presidential Council is attached to a transparent and fair management of our oil revenue, which belongs to all Libyans. The goal is to have public funds not be a source of conflict, and for them to benefit all Libyans in every corner of the country without geographical, political, or other distinctions. If we manage to achieve this goal, it will reduce the current conflict for power and create a climate that is favorable for our democratic transition. Mr. President, my country considers the role of the United Nations in a positive light, in spite of the slower rate of that intervention recently. We still expect an active role of the United Nations through the new leadership of our UN mission in our country. We call on the continuation of the mission in favor of national inclusive reconciliation that will allow us to overcome the current impasse. This impasse has opened the way for individual initiatives that risk undermining all the political progress achieved thanks to the political dialogue under the auspices of the United Nations. I also call for a new momentum in our economic development. One of the three trajectories of the Berlin Conference, which was neglected as far as we're concerned, that is transparency and justice in management of oil resources, financial control and public expenditure, and combating against corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, the world today is on the threshold of a new international order, an order which reminds us of the suffering of humankind at the beginning of the 20th century. And while we thought that the errors of the past would never be repeated again, today, now, it's time for human conscience to speak out in favor of peace, and that the entire world supports the international principles enshrined in the United Nations to uphold the principle of sovereignty of states and to resolve conflicts by peaceful means and to respect good neighborly relations and not destabilize security of nations. I also call on the respect for the right of people to use nuclear energy for peaceful purposes in conformity with the criteria defined by the IAEA. Furthermore, my country is on the front lines of the combat against terrorism, and I call on a renewed unity in fighting terrorism. Terrorism still represents a threat to all countries of the world. This threat does not spare any race, any religion, any civilization. My country has fulfilled all its responsibilities at the international level to strike at the sources of financing of terrorism. And from this tribune, I would like to reiterate the commitment of my country to support the right of the Palestinian people to create their own state. and to stop the settlements and attacks against it. And we call on the upholding international resolutions on this point. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, this month the Libyan people are observing a minute of silence during the Day of the Martyr, a day that coincides with the assassination of our national hero in the anti-colonial fight, Omar al-Mukhtar. The Libyan people are inspired by the combat of its ancestors to learn patience and to be more determined in defending its rights. The Libyan people draw inspiration from its founding fathers to become more tolerant. The current period will be enshrined in the national memory. Future generations will recognize the positions of those who supported us and those who undermined our security, who pillaged our richness, our wealth. Libya, due to its Arab neighborhood, due to its position in Africa, is a link between civilizations and as an economic hub where the interests of the world are concentrated. And the damage that we've experienced have not only affected the Libyan people, but have also affected the region and our international relations. Thank you very much.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale, je tiens à remercier le...
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Presidential Council of the State of Libya for his address, and I ask protocol to accompany him. Thank you.
L'Assemblée va maintenant...
The Assembly will now hear an address by Her Excellency Maya Sandu, President of the Republic of Moldova. I request that protocol accompany Her Excellency.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale,
on behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor of welcoming Her Excellency Madame Maya Sandu, President of the Republic of Moldova, and I invite her to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Your Excellencies, I'm standing before you today proudly representing the Republic of Moldova, a future member of the European Union. I'm grateful for the unanimous support that we received from the 27 EU member states. Thank you for your recognition and vote of trust in our love for freedom, dynamic democracy, and commitment to the rule of law. A successful peace project, the European Union, through cooperation and integration, was forged to stop the cycle of wars that tormented our continent for centuries. This is another watershed moment in our history, and the EU has to do it again. By applying to join the European Union, we want the world to know we choose democracy over autocracy, liberty over oppression, peace over war, and prosperity over poverty. The EU candidate status gives us hope, a clear sense of direction, a unifying goal, an anchor, and a strong sense of belonging to the free world. Ladies and gentlemen, 1 year ago, no one of us here would have imagined a major war in Europe. Russia's unprovoked war against another sovereign state, Ukraine, has shaken the world to the core, has put to test the fundamental principles of the UN, has shattered global security, triggered a European energy crisis, global food shortages, and an economic downturn. 7 months of bombings have killed thousands of innocent people and pushed millions of Ukrainians to flee their homes. This war is not just an attack on our neighbor and friend, Ukraine. It is an attack on the rules-based international order. It is an attack on nuclear safety. It is an attack on food supplies to countries in the Middle East and Africa. It is an attack on this very institution where we find in ourselves today. we firmly condemn the war against Ukraine, as well as the recently announced additional mobilization of troops by Russia. We firmly stand with Ukraine and support its independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. I would like to express my utmost admiration to all Ukrainians for their courage, their resilience, and their inner power to continue to do this fight for survival, justice, and freedom. It is our moral duty as an international community to continue supporting Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting today to keep all of us safe, to keep Europe safe. It needs our support. Europe, all of us, we must help Ukraine. As I stand at this tribune, I represent a country that wants peace. I represent the citizens of Moldova who, irrespective of the language that we speak, Romanian, Ukrainian, Russian, Gagauz, or Bulgarian, regardless of our ethnicity or political preferences, whether we live on the right bank of River Nistru or in the breakaway region of Transnistria, we all want peace. A country of less than 3 million people, we have sheltered more than 500,000 refugees fleeing the war. At the peak of the inflow, our population grew by 4%. Some 80,000 refugees chose to stay among us. I use this opportunity to pay tribute from this high rostrum to all Moldovan families who showed unprecedented solidarity with refugees by opening their homes and hearts to those in need. I'm proud of my people. I'm also grateful to the international partners, including the United Nations, who have provided assistance in managing the humanitarian crisis. I also thank the UN Secretary General and other high-level officials who visited our country in our hour of need to show support and solidarity. My deep gratitude goes to France, Germany, Romania, and other partners for setting up the Moldovan support platform that stands by our country in these difficult times. Ladies and gentlemen, Moldova knows what it is to be a country divided by conflict. In 1992, we faced a brief but tragic war in the Transnistrian region of our country. 3 decades later, we are still trying to overcome the consequences of that conflict and reintegrate our country. The only way to achieve this is through peaceful dialogue and respect for our sovereignty and territorial integrity. As Russia has launched its war against Ukraine, we have worked harder than ever to maintain peace on both banks of Nistru River. We have done our best to ensure that all citizens of Moldova, including those residing in the breakaway region, continue to enjoy peace. The illegal presence of the Russian military troops in the Transnistrian region infringes our neutrality and increases the security risk of our country. We call on the complete and unconditional withdrawal of Russian troops. We call on the destruction of ammunition from Kobasna stockpiles, which pose a security and environmental threat to the region as a whole. As we strive to maintain peace, our economy and society are bearing the brunt of Russia's war against Ukraine. Our resources are strained, investments have slowed down, trade and transport routes are disrupted, inflation is nearing 35%. In addition, we're facing a wide spectrum of hybrid threats, from disinformation and propaganda to cyber attacks and energy pressures. The abnormally high prices for natural gas and Russia's attempts to weaponize gas and oil supplies to Europe have triggered an unprecedented energy crisis. We are one of the most vulnerable countries in the face of this crisis. But this only makes us more determined to diversify our energy resources and decrease dependence on fossil fuels. We plan to increase the share of renewable electricity supplies from 3 to 30% in the next 3 years. This will make our country stronger and our environment healthier and safer. Distinguished audience, we all know that the only way to save the planet is joint global action against climate change. The same goes for the fight against corruption. Corruption weakens states and erodes democracies. We should take it more seriously than ever before. We need clear international mechanisms to stop the flow of dirty money. We need better instruments for asset recovery and restitution. We need better information exchanges between law enforcement and anti-fraud authorities in different countries. And we need to set up international sanction regimes against corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, despite all challenges, Moldova is pressing ahead with our reform agenda. We are building a stronger and more democratic state. Last year, Moldova improved 49 positions in the Press Freedom Index, ranking 40th in the world. Justice reform and the fight against corruption is at the core of our transformation. We are working hard to become a better place for investors, to create jobs, boost the economy, and bring greater prosperity to our people. We are investing in connectivity with Europe, and we are trying to bring our country closer to European standards. We're building roads and bridges, hospitals, and a more modern education system. We are building stronger institutions that will benefit the citizens of Moldova. We are focused, persistent, and relentless. We are determined to bring Moldova into the EU so that every Moldovan can have better living standards and more economic opportunities at home. This is the only way for Moldova to grow as a consolidated democracy in our part of the world during these difficult times. Ladies and gentlemen, as I come before you from a region weakened by war and energy crisis, drought, and rampant inflation, my message is this. In the face of man-made human suffering and economic adversity, the countries of the world must stand together once again. We must do so to reaffirm the value of peace and the inviolability of human life, to defend democracy and freedom, and to uphold the right of every country to decide their own fate. Thank you.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale,
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Moldova for her statement, and I ask protocol to escort Her Excellency. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Hage Geingob, President of the Republic of Namibia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
au nom de l'Assemblée générale,
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the... On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honour to welcome His Excellency Mr. Hage Geingob, President of the Republic of Namibia, and I invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Namibia congratulates His Excellency Shapa Korosi on your election as President of the 77th session of this August Assembly. Please be assured of Namibia's full support as you provide leadership during your tenure. Allow me to also extend appreciation to your predecessor, His Excellency Abdallah Shahid, for his sterling stewardship as President of the 76th session of the General Assembly. Mr. President, since attaining our political independence 32 years ago, we are proud of the work we have undertaken towards the second phase of our struggle for economic independence. During this period, we have built a strong foundation for our governance architecture, with emphasis on strengthening processes, systems, and institutions. Given these advances in effective governance, we are optimistic in our quest to deal with the triple challenges of inequality, unemployment, and poverty. Our impact plan, the Harambee Prosperity Plan 2, which is accelerating the implementation of the national development plans, is fast-tracking our efforts towards Vision 2030. Since my term of office is coming to an end on 20th March 2025, as a nation with a constitution that binds the head of state to 2-term limits, we have set in motion a process for an orderly succession to continue with our peaceful development. The ruling party, SWAPO, of which I am the head, is currently conducting primaries. There is a real possibility that the next candidate of the SWAPO party for the national presidential elections will be a woman or a young male, of whom the male is from the generation that was never in exile. The presence of women in the line of succession is a demonstration of the strides we have made in gender equality, with women representation at 40% in the National Assembly. Moreover, 90% of our banks are helmed by women. Namibia is a child of international solidarity, midwifed by the United Nations. Therefore, we are convinced about solidarity and partnership as critical enablers of our developmental aspirations. Allow me at this juncture to thank the Secretary General for his comprehensive report on our common agenda, which carries clear recommendations on how to advance the SDGs and all existing global agreements through multilateralism, with the UN at the center of our efforts. I commend the Secretary General for his visionary leadership in proposing that we should meet in a summit of the future to reflect on challenges and opportunities that await current and future generations. Namibia supports the convening of this important summit at the earliest opportune time. Over the past few months, it has been encouraging to note the concerted efforts to shed a spotlight on transforming education and advancing SDG 4. Education is a sector that Namibia has consistently been prioritizing through the allocation of the resources, both human and financial, and the consistent prioritization of policy development. In the context of the recently concluded Transformation of Education Summit, Namibia commits to transformative leadership, ensuring access to inclusive digital technologies, and developing a strategy for innovative financing and resource mobilization. In Namibia, the education sector receives the largest share of budgetary support, equivalent to 8% of GDP, and almost a quarter of the total national budget. The Namibian government offers free primary and secondary education, which demonstrates our commitment to prioritizing and expanding access to education for all. Furthermore, we are proud of the recent landing of the Google Equinor subsea cable, which lends itself greatly to changing Namibia's digital transformation landscape and narrowing our digital divide, in line with our commitment to leveraging the fourth industrial revolution. In Namibia, we have set up the fourth industrial revolution task force, which recently made recommendations as to how Namibia can strengthen domestic capabilities to strive to derive optimal gains from fourth industrial revolution. In line with the recommendations of the task force, the government is currently developing a consolidated national fourth industrial strategy to provide overarching direction and multi-sectoral planning. The strategy will prioritize education reform to close the fourth industrial revolution skills gap, cyber security, and expansion of ICT infrastructure and services. Mr. President, global debt is at an unprecedented level and interest rates are rising. This reality limits our fiscal space. As we talk about our collective aspirations, we should remain acutely aware of the vulnerabilities facing developing countries. Namibia's classification as an upper middle income country presents challenges with regard to mobilizing resources to finance our development goals. As I have been saying, taking our GDP and dividing it by a small population, thus deriving a high per capita income, without doubt is flawed formula that requires urgent consideration. The formula does not take into account the vast income disparities between the wealthy white and the poor blacks, which is a consequence of 100 years of colonialism and apartheid occupation. However, I am pleased to hear that a number of developing and developed countries are in agreement with this unfair classification, which denies countries like Namibia access to soft loans and grants, which are necessary to fight inequality and to lift many out of poverty. The choice of the theme of this session, quote, solutions through solidarity, sustainability, and science, unquote, calls on us to deal with the issues that affect us all. Therefore, I'm confident that the unfair classification of countries like Namibia as upper middle income countries will enjoy priority. Over the past few months, we have witnessed stark geopolitical tensions, a reminder of the fragility of our world order. Threats to peace and security come at a great cost to the men, women, and children trapped in such situations. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is now in its 7th month, with serious consequences for food and energy supply chains. Namibia believes that dialogue is the condition sine qua non for the peaceful resolution of any conflict. Our United Nations was created for the maintenance of peace and security and should lead a peaceful resolution in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Namibia is a member of the AU Peace and Security Council and chair of the SADC organ on politics, defense, and security cooperation, continues to demonstrate its commitment to regional and continental stability by advocating for the advancement of infrastructure for peace, democracy, and protection of human rights. In this regard, as a new chairman of the SADC organ on politics, defense, and security cooperation, I'm calling for peaceful general elections in the Kingdom of Lesotho on the 7th of October 2022. SADC is also seized with the developments in the Kingdom of Eswatini and the Republic of Mozambique. In that vein, I have commenced a process of dialogue with the leaders of Eswatini, Lesotho, and Mozambique in order to ensure the successful implementation of SADC decisions for peace and stability to prevail in our region. I always say inclusivity spells harmony and exclusivity spells conflict. Africa is a continent of 1.2 billion citizens, and the exclusion of Africa from the Security Council is an injustice. For as long as the Council fails to reflect in stature and composition current global realities, it will not be able to adequately address global concerns. We therefore reiterate our call for the reform of the Security Council in line with the common African position. Mr. President, self-determination is a human right. The continued injustice meted out against the people of Palestine are a reminder of the urgent need to start implementing the two-state solution as the only viable alternative that can end inequality and bring peace to both the people of Palestine and Israel, and indeed the region as a whole. In the same vein, the lack of progress in implementing UN resolutions to resolve the question of Western Sahara should be something that we must all have a collective shame for. Namibia pledges unwavering solidarity for nations that continue to bear the heavy burden of sanctions. Namibia reiterates its long-standing call for the lifting of the unjust embargo against Cuba. I met a 50-year-old young Cuban man who has not known anything but the sanctions. Since he was born, it's the sanctions. How long are we going to continue with that? We are talking about building the peace in the world. But how can a country be sanctioned for such a long time? And children born don't know anything but sanctions. Please, it is time that sons and daughters of Cuba are given their right to a decent life, freedom, and embargo that denies them their right to develop their own country should be stopped now. Equally, we call on the lifting of sanctions against the Republic of Zimbabwe. Why are the sanctions in place for a country which is making progress at all levels? President Emerson Mnangagwa and the people of Zimbabwe have made laudable progress and reforms. We should be given a chance to succeed without the weight of sanctions. Mr. President, the health of our planet is in serious jeopardy. Our home is on fire. We are experiencing unprecedented impacts of climate change, including severe droughts and ravaging field fires. Time is a luxury we do not have. We have to act decisively to reduce carbon emissions as our contribution to the preservation of our planet and the people. Namibia, like many developing countries, remains vulnerable to the asymmetrical impacts of climate change. Therefore, at COP27, Namibia plans to announce major developments in its ambitions to decarbonize global hard-to-abate sectors through the production of green hydrogen. Furthermore, the first hydrogen-to-power project in Africa is expected to be operational by 2024 in the town of Swakopmund in Namibia. This is an example of what is possible when we pull together in the same direction. Our ambitions are not only necessary to mitigate the ravaging impacts of climate change, but are also a critical component of our post-COVID-19 economic recovery. Therefore, Namibia remains ready to work with the international community to ensure the most optimal utilization of its natural resources to combat climate change. A just energy transition is about fair opportunities for developing nations to sustainably access natural endowments at their disposal. Namibia has recently discovered promising deposits of hydrocarbons and is exploring significant deposits of rare earth metals. As part of our goal to ensure sustainable utilization of our natural resources, I recently launched the Welwitschia Fund, our nation's sovereign wealth fund. The fund is a demonstration of our commitment to fiscal prudence and sustainable resource management for current and future generations. Mr. President, in conclusion, today on the 21st of September 2022, we are convening in this chamber on the United Nations International Day of Peace under the theme, quote unquote, "End Racism, Build Peace." Peace is a wonderful gift, but a fragile one if it is not handled properly. Peace is more than the absence of war. Peace is about inclusivity and development of all nations. Our United Nations, as the premier guarantor of multilateralism, is our best bet to ensure a peaceful and prosperous humanity. Namibia will continue to place a high premium on the noble aspirations of the United Nations as a beacon of hope and equality of all nations. As a beneficiary of successful multilateral efforts, we hold in high regard the convening power of this august assembly and recommit to working with fellow member states to change the world for the better. I thank you very much.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Namibia for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Borut Pahor, President of the Republic of Slovenia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Borut Pahor, President of the Republic of Slovenia, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends. I was born after the Second World War. So, all my life, the cry of never again has echoed around the world and especially in Europe. With the exception of the war in Balkans, even the major geopolitical changes in Europe since the fall of Berlin Wall have been peaceful. This has made an important contribution to building hope for a lasting peace. This hope has been thoroughly shaken by the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Will this make us stop believing in the possibility of lasting peace? I think no. We must not leave our children a world in a fear of war. For the sake of their secure future, we have a duty to do whatever it takes we can to ensure that the precious hope for a lasting peace returns to our hearts. After all, it was with this hope and our shared responsibility that the United Nations was founded. The United Nations has set very clear rules of engagement to which all members have committed ourselves. These include a commitment to peaceful settlement of disputes cooperation and respect for fundamental human dignity. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to speak about peace, climate change, and multilateralism today. First of all, number one, peace and security. The Russian Federation's decision for a military attack on Ukraine has shaken these rules. So have many other armed conflicts in different parts of the world. The Russian aggression has put international security at risk. Yesterday's announcement of President Putin that there will be a referendum in parts of Ukraine is a continuation of aggression and is in breach of international law. I especially condemn his word about possible use of nuclear weapon. This war is threatening the already fragile stability of the Western Balkans. It has also threatened international food and energy security. I commend the UN Secretary General for his engagement and Turkey for its support to reach the agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, peace is, as it has been just said, not just an absence of war. In peace, leaders should strengthen and nurture good relations with other countries. It is our obligation to resolve outstanding issues in a spirit of compromise and mutual understanding. Only in this way we will reduce the chances of old grievances and historical traumas to come to life once again. I'm grateful to many of you for the opportunity to do this together for the benefit of well-being of our countries and the wider international community. Fostering good relations and building trust within societies and between them is the most effective means of preventing armed conflicts. Number two, more cooperation for a better future. Nurturing and strengthening good relations between countries is also necessary to address more efficiently the challenges of our times. Among these, climate change is one of the most pressing. Our common task is to preserve the planet for future generations. What we need is more efficient measures and more solidarity. Slovenia pledges special support to Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific to assist them in their efforts against biodiversity loss, water stress, and climate damage. We are contributing to the Least Developed Countries Fund of the Global Environment Facility. Initiating the Green Group, Slovenia is working together with like-minded countries in the promotion of green policies. We are deeply grateful to the General Assembly for the historic universal recognition of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Slovenia was one of the original proponents, along with Costa Rica, Maldives, Morocco, and Switzerland. That was a much-needed boost for multilateralism, but we can and we should do more. The upcoming UN Climate Change, Biodiversity, and Water Conference are an excellent opportunity to commit ourselves to do more and better. I wish to thank the Secretary General for putting forward our Common Agenda report. We support the proposed Second World Social Summit in 2025 and expect it to address the challenges of structural inequalities. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no security and development without respect of human dignity. In all our efforts, we should be led by a right-based approach. We should be attentive to all signs of human rights regression and should act accordingly. And finally, number three, strengthening multilateralism and candidature for the United Nations Security Council. Excellencies, colleagues and friends, the UN Charter is a fundament of our international system. Rule-based order is a sine qua non for maintaining peace and security, a just and balanced international system. Slovenia has proved itself a reliable and trustworthy member of the UN family and an honest broker. We are engaged in a genuine dialogue and constant search for creative and good solutions to our common challenges. We are part of peacemaking and stabilization efforts that includes humanitarian demining, rehabilitation, and saving the lives of civilians all around the globe. We are actively participating in efforts to strengthen the legal framework and respect for international law, including ending impunity. We build trust to secure a better future. Let me say that my country, Slovenia, has no enemies, but only friends all around the globe. Slovenia is well placed to be a non-permanent member of the Security Council 2024 to 2025. Endless striving for peace, justice, mutual understanding, reconciliation, both within and between societies, respect for ethnic, national, religious diversities, promotion of sustainable development and solidarity. This is the task of Slovenia, and this is our common task. I would like to thank you for your attention. I wish you all the best.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale, je tiens à remercier.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Slovenia for the statement and a request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency, Mr. William Samoei Ruto, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces of the Republic of Kenya. I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale,
On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency William Samoei Ruto, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces of the Republic of Kenya, and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President of this 77th session of the UN General Assembly, Your Excellency Saba Korosi, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I am grateful for the immense privilege to join Your Excellencies in this distinguished assembly, a privilege made possible by peaceful, democratic transition following free and fair elections in Kenya on the 9th of August, 2022. Elections that not only stand as testimony of the universal power of democracy, but also of the manifest ability of African peoples to invest in stronger nations and a secure future, robust institutions, effective constitutions, and the impartial administration of the rule of law guarantees the achievement of shared aspirations. This 77th session of the UN General Assembly comes at a unique moment when the entire world is struggling with multiple grave challenges that include regional conflicts, the COVID-19 pandemic, the triple planetary crisis, food insecurity, and the rising cost of living. I take this opportunity to congratulate you, Mr. President, on your election to preside over this session, and to express my confidence that your wealth of experience offers us significant assurance of your good leadership. Your motto, solutions through solidarity, sustainability, and science, succinctly captures with particular resonance the urgent imperatives of our time. I assure you of Kenya's firm support and cooperation during your tenure. I further take this opportunity to commend your predecessor, His Excellency Abdullah Shahid, for his bold steps in steering the United Nations community and for ensuring its business continuity under the unprecedented circumstances occasioned by multiple global threats, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Excellencies, human well-being is under grave threat. The health of the planet requires urgent attention. The immense pressure exerted by conventional threats such as climate change, the global food crisis, terrorism, cybercrime, and armed conflict has been compounded by unprecedented, devastating disruptions due to COVID-19. I express my approval of the theme for this session, a watershed moment, transformative solutions to interlocking challenges. Because it boldly signals the window of opportunity we now have to escalate our engagement from firm consensus to decisive action. In many respects, the COVID-19 pandemic stripped us of many illusions and exposed stark justice and solidarity deficits in the face of existential crisis. It brought into sharp focus the global economy's two-lane highway, repressively patrolled by a rising tide of exclusionist nationalism, a specter that undermines prospects of collective action and significantly impairs the resolve of the international community to guarantee fundamental rights, including safety and dignity of the world's vulnerable majority. It is also for this reason that many nations, especially from the global south, now advocate for the democratization of the global governance and a reimagined multilateralism that is inclusive and works for the good of all. Kenya stands ready to work with other nations to achieve the Pan-Africanization of multilateralism and a more just and inclusive system of global governance. It is important to reflect on these matters as we do our best to get our people, enterprises, and industries back on their feet so that the engine of development can power our societies towards prosperity that actually leaves no one behind. Building back better is the universal rallying call to incorporate lessons learned into doing more in a better way to recover from the shock. I suggest that we have a golden opportunity to faithfully adhere to this motto by augmenting it inward and indeed with an additional B, building back better from the bottom. Building back better from the bottom upwards is essentially about including the marginalized to working majority in the economic mainstream. The bottom millions relentlessly wage their daily battle for survival in a crowded arena characterized by scarcity of opportunity and generally precarious existence. The ingenuity, optimism, resilience, and energy in this ever-bustling bottom is sometimes called hustling. Invisibly to policymakers and beyond the reach of many public services, these hustlers take nothing for granted, surviving overwhelming odds and frequently succeeding greatly. In the words of Abraham Lincoln, things may come to those who wait, but only things left behind by those who hustle. It is time to bolster the resilience of our nations, to mainstream these millions through deliberate strategies and efforts for economic inclusion by building back better from the bottom up. The interlocking challenges of conflicts, triple planetary crisis, and the global food crisis have impeded our momentum and obstructed our focus on achieving fundamental transformations towards sustainable development. In the Horn of Africa region, severe drought and disruption of supply chains due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the Russia-Ukraine conflict, have left us food insecure, and consequently, we have been constrained to repurpose our strategies to prioritize drought and famine relief, insulating education and from disruption, and improving social protection and healthcare systems to secure the well-being of our people. Many countries now bear witness to the unsettling phenomena of rivers, canals, and water reservoirs that are drying up on account of drought and heat waves occasioned by climate change. Kenya is no exception. The northern arid and semi-arid rangelands of our country have been gravely impacted by drought, whose severity has not been seen or experienced in 40 years. 3.1 million residents of these atolls are now severely food insecure on account of scarce rainfall over 3 consecutive seasons, leading to poor crop and pasture. This unprecedented confluence of intensely adverse events has exacerbated water scarcity and starvation, worsened by rising food prices, thus complicating Kenya's roadmap towards delivering good quality of life to our citizens and hindering the progress to achieving SDG number 6 and SDG number 2. Severe drought has affected not only the Horn of Africa and the Sahel regions, but continues to devastate many others, including Asia, Europe, and the Americas. If for no other reason, the fact that we all are in this together must strengthen the case for concerted efforts across continents. With this in mind, I call on member states and all relevant stakeholders to demonstrate strong political will and showcase effective cooperation by supporting the most affected countries financially, as well as through sharing land restoration and climate change adaptation technologies. It is through collaboration to expand inclusion that we can attain a new paradigm in multilateralism. The latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reminds us that we cannot afford to waste another moment debating the merits of doing something vis-à-vis doing nothing. It will soon be too late to reverse the course of events, and then even the best possible interventions will not suffice. As leaders, every day is an opportunity to expedite our efforts to confront the triple planetary crisis. It will be recalled that during the Stockholm Plan 50 meeting, which Kenya had the honor of co-hosting with Sweden, there was consensus from states on the need to act urgently in addressing environmental impacts. Given this agreement, it is deeply concerning that little progress has been made in respect of the needful actions. It is time to collectively contemplate urgent measures needed to implement high-priority actions required to contain ongoing disruptions as we deliberate on long-term implementation approaches to be undertaken. I fully agree with the Secretary General's memorable statement that, and I quote, "We have a rendezvous with a climate disaster," end of quote. I add that we must not be taken by surprise. If indeed forewarned is forearmed, this is our opportunity to mobilize with tremendous urgency and take action at once. Excellencies, the agricultural sector has an important part to play in reducing the severity of climate change. A number of practices have a bearing, positive or negative, on various dimensions of the environment. Investing in modern agricultural technology is therefore one important avenue towards tackling prevailing environmental changes. Kenya is responding through substantial investment in climate-resilient agriculture. At the core of our 10-year strategy for agricultural sector growth and transformation are 9 flagships. They include the registration of farmers to direct incentives, improving farmer practice through customized extension services, monitoring of emergency food reserve stocks using digital food balance sheet, and the use of early warning systems to monitor food supplies and market prices. Agriculture remains the bedrock of the development of many nations and will thus continue to hold the key to the creation of equitable and sustainable growth for our people. No country, large or small, has ever attained significant growth without modernizing its agricultural sector. And as we rededicate ourselves to these targets, we must, in the immediate term, find answers to the severe deficit in the availability, flow, and accessibility of fertilizer to our farmers worldwide. I couldn't agree more with Secretary General Guterres on his warning right here yesterday that, and I quote, "Without action now, the global fertilizer shortage will quickly morph into a global food shortage," end of quote. We are encouraged to note that education, health, agriculture, and numerous other public services have become increasingly reliant on digital access. The world needs greater investment in the development of ICT infrastructure, accompanied with policies that support innovation and increased acquisition and deployment of technology. In so doing, we should be driven by the conviction that these measures offer a viable shortcut to poverty reduction and the promotion of inclusive development. I call for stronger global partnerships to enhance ICT infrastructure in developing countries and bridge the yawning digital divide between the global south and the rest of the world. Excellencies, this 77th session of the Assembly follows the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP, at 50, as well as Stockholm plus 50, and the 4th United Nations Ocean Conference in Lisbon. Outcomes of these conferences demanded real commitment to address global environmental concerns as a matter of urgency and for a just transition to sustainable economies that work for all people. The March 2022 landmark resolution of the 5th United Nations Environmental Assembly in Nairobi to end plastic pollution is a decisive signal to the world that the world is prepared and motivated to act on this menace. Kenya is committed to work closely with other nations to pursue legally binding instruments aimed at bringing an end to plastic pollution. As the host nation to UNEP and the UN Habitat, Kenya affirms that these critical United Nations agencies have an indispensable role in the promotion of environmental sustainability globally, as well as developing socially and environmentally sound and sustainable cities. In keeping with its strong commitment to multilateral institutions, Kenya has made available more land for the United Nations office in Nairobi to facilitate the upgrading of its complex. I take this opportunity to call on member states to complement this contribution through enhanced financing to adequately modernize the UN facilities in Nairobi. Kenya remains a strong advocate for making the sustainable use of oceans and blue economy resources a development priority, holding the firm belief that significantly increased investment in this essential sector can end hunger, can also reduce poverty, create jobs, and spur economic growth. I urge the Secretary General to continue calling attention to the urgent need to develop this vital sector. In particular, I call on developed countries to to invest in sustainable fishing, protect marine ecosystems, and share ocean-based climate solutions with developing countries. For our part, I am pleased to report that building on the historic 2018 Sustainable Blue Economy Conference in Nairobi, Kenya is reviewing its national blue economy strategy to strengthen community structures in participatory management of freshwater, coastal and marine resources and ecosystems. The strategy is expected to contribute to our economic development through food and nutrition security, coastal and rural development, and income increases along the aquaculture value chain. It also enhances maritime transport and tourism. We invite development partnerships to invest in Africa towards building capacity to sustainably utilize marine resources. We must rally together to make the best use of Africa's vast blue resources in developing our economies while meeting our climate targets. As we look forward to the 27th Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, COP27, scheduled for Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, it is logical to expect that member states will shift their attention towards the development and implementation of frameworks for climate change mitigation. Accomplishment of pending actions by member states is essential for the implementation work that lie ahead. I therefore call upon all of us to urgently deliver on all commitments made towards climate change financing. On this matter, it is critical to emphasize that we are running out of time. Over the past decade, Kenya has sustained its aggressive pursuit for rapid socioeconomic transformation through three principal roadmaps. First is the Kenya National Vision 2030. Second, the formal long-term blueprint aimed at transforming Kenya into a newly industrialized, upper middle-income country, providing high quality of life to its citizens in a clean and secure environment by 2030. The second has been the Africa Union's Agenda 2063, and the third, the Sustainable Development Goals. Kenya looks towards tapping into a variety of resources to catalyze the achievement of these interlocking and mutually reinforcing objectives. The disruption and ensuing crisis due to COVID-19 pandemic compelled us to diversify our focus into new interventions, including economic stimulus program, a COVID-19 economic recovery strategy, and a COVID-19 socio-economic re-engineering recovery strategy, all aimed at mitigating the adverse impacts of the pandemic. I confirm that we have done the best of everything we could in the circumstances. Nevertheless, it is not enough. Kenya and the rest of Africa, like other developing nations, are in need of greater international partnership and cooperation to avert economic crisis in the wake of the pandemic. Developing countries, being heavily burdened by external debt servicing, run the risk of losing development gains due to the shocks inflicted by the pandemic and associated disruptions. I call upon global financial institutions and the international community to take urgent measures and release all existing financial instruments to provide much-needed additional liquidity and secure better fiscal space for developing countries like Kenya to enhance social investment, support climate change adaptation and mitigation, and address security needs and resolve development financing challenges. On behalf of Kenya, therefore, I join other leaders in calling upon the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and other multilateral lenders to extend pandemic-related debt relief to the worst-hit countries, especially those affected by the devastating combination of conflict, climate change, and COVID-19. Furthermore, I urge the G20 to extend and expand the scope of the common framework to suspend or reschedule debt repayments by middle-income countries during the pandemic recovery period. At this point, I would like this distinguished assembly to take a moment and consider the peace and security landscape, a landscape currently beset with multiple challenges, yet abounding with considerable opportunities. Our home region of East and Horn of Africa is in particular burdened by significant conflicts and challenges with implications for the region's development. We stand on the cusp of first opportunity for galvanizing confidence-building measures to generate and sustain momentum towards sustainable peace. In its role as an anchor state in the region, Kenya has sustained our investment in diplomatic efforts to find lasting peace in multiple situations within and beyond the region. Although some processes have yielded undeniable success, challenges remain. I therefore strongly reiterate our call for partnership towards confidence-building measures and urge more concerted efforts towards sustainable peace and stability. Kenya is currently serving in the United Nations Security Council. I am proud to confirm that our engagement over the last 2 years has prioritized regional peace and security, countering terrorism and violent extremism, peace support operations, climate and security as critical contributions to the collective efforts to build a safer, more prosperous, and peaceful world. I am also proud to state that Kenya has continued to champion closer cooperation between regional mechanisms and the Security Council as an effective means to achieving international peace and security. Kenya continues to advocate the renewal of the Africa Union security architecture, which draws comparative strength from the highly productive complementarity between the United Nations, the Africa Union, and the regional economic communities. Working closely with the 2 elected African countries of the A3 in the UN Security Council, we are committed to finding a stronger Africa voice in the Council and achieving a consensus-driven, rules-based multilateral system. It is our manifest intention to see greater Pan-Africanization of the global agenda in order to make multilateralism work for the people of the world in their diversity. It is time for multilateralism to reflect the voice of farmers, represent the hopes of villagers, champion the aspirations of pastoralists, defend the rights of fisherfolk, express the dreams of traders, respect the wishes of workers, and indeed protect the welfare of all peoples of the global South. Let me express the strong collective conviction of my country that the relevance, legitimacy, and moral authority of the United Nations will forever remain deficient, undermined by the absence of comprehensive reforms of the United Nations Security Council. We therefore remain firmly committed to reforming the Security Council to make it a more effective, representative, and democratic global institution. Given the magnitude and variety of challenges the world continues to confront, a more fit for purpose United Nations is urgently needed, one that possesses the legitimacy and efficacy in dealing with threats to international peace and security. A just and inclusive world order cannot be spearheaded by a United Nations Security Council that persistently and unjustly fails the inclusivity criterion. Similarly, threats to democracy will not be credibly resolved by an undemocratic, unrepresentative Security Council. It is vitally important for this critical institution to reflect the values it is entrusted to protect, to defend, to uphold on behalf of humankind. We welcome the call by President Biden this morning for the expansion of the membership of the Security Council as a significant step in the right direction, and we look forward to building consensus for the actualization of the same. The COVID-19 pandemic severely disrupted health systems, seriously challenging the implementation of programs that are vital for the realization of health-related sustainable development goals. To place us firmly back on track and accelerate our progress towards these SDGs targets, it is imperative for us to foster sustainable partnerships between governments, other state actors, the civil society, and the private sector. This modality of collective action is particularly vital for building resilient health systems, whose importance in enabling us withstand future pandemics and other health crises can no longer be disputed. For this reason, Kenya will continue to strongly support the development of legally binding World Health Organization international instrument to anchor global solidarity and promote equity. The fact of the matter is that the COVID-19 pandemic exposed for all the world to see the severe deficit of these critical values in our present multilateral configuration. Global supply chains remained impervious to demands in the global south generally, and Africa in particular. Unequal access to vaccines underscored this unjust and unequal situation with unforgettable clarity. Whenever human life, security, and welfare is in jeopardy, it is immoral to administer interventions through frameworks that are anchored on fundamental inequality. We are all witnesses to admirable demonstrations of effective solidarity in response to crises in various parts of the world. Our knowledge of the possibility of spontaneous yet resolute global solidarity reinforces the African exception as particularly repugnant. From genocides and civil conflict to famine and pandemics, the African continent is consistently left behind to bear the brunt of weak solidarity and disastrous failure of multilateralism. History indicates the last time Africa was the focal point of strong and effective multilateralism and multilateral consensus was during the Berlin Conference of 1884-1885, and the character of the ensuing interventions casts a long shadow to date. Not to put too fine a point to it, the failure of multilateralism during crises which relegate the people of Africa outside the cycle of moral consideration and normalizes humanitarian neglect and other casual injustices are failures of humanity. Nothing about Africa, and I say nothing about Africa or its people makes it acceptable for this type of failure to persist in this era. And we have an urgent moral duty to do better, and to right this wrong. For decades, Africa has borne the brunt of three epidemics: the HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. I applaud innovative partnerships like the Global Fund for their progress in addressing the three menaces, and also welcome the ambitious targets set for the 7th replenishment cycle. Kenya is committed to supporting the Global Fund and implementing the agreed targets in order to actualize our pledge at the replenishment conference. Kenya calls upon all countries implementing the Global Fund programs, especially fellow African states, to remain at the forefront in championing for successful replenishment of the fund. This way, the mobilization of much-needed resources is enhanced, bringing us closer to the final elimination of these dangerous diseases. In conclusion, Kenya joins the Secretary General in calling for the strengthening of multilateralism as the only sustainable path to a peaceful, stable, and prosperous world for all. This is the imperative of our time and the call of this moment. It is time to work on the trust deficit with stronger conviction that none of us is really safe until all of us are safe. The theme of the 77th session, and I quote, "A watershed moment, transformative solutions to interlocking challenges," end of quote, demands that we recognize the crises we must confront are interlinked in a complicated way. They can only be effectively addressed through more imaginative strategies and innovative formula. A population of 8 billion people in a densely networked world increasingly looks up to the multilateral system as the anchor for their individual aspirations directly and indirectly through robust national frameworks. Increasingly, therefore, the United Nations system is expected to be responsive to these needs and for the proceedings in this forum, in a forum like this, to speak to ordinary people in far-flung reaches of our incredibly diverse globe. It is impossible to address all their individual needs directly, but it is possible to respond to all of them by speaking with conviction to the universal values of equality, inclusion, justice, solidarity, and collective action, and by making sure that all our interventions effectively reflect them with clarity. The integrity of the international order must be measured by the distance separating our resolutions, consensus, and agreement from decisions, actions, committed, interventions, and effective solutions. A watershed moment, therefore, demands that we reduce that gap drastically and quickly. Kenya pursues numerous essential domestic agenda through the multilateral framework. We are heavily invested in the strength, effectiveness, and eventual success of all interventions formulated by the United Nations. It is important that the output of this and other similar fora achieve immediate resonance in the minds and lives of our youth still seeking opportunity to express and actualize themselves, our farmers working to feed nations, our Juakali entrepreneurs striving in pursuit of success in the informal economy, and our professionals who formulate policy, implement strategy, and monitor service delivery in public and private sectors. Africa places immense value in the international community and the tremendous possibilities it can unlock through inclusive, sustainable, and effective action to transform the lives of our people and establish lasting peace, security, and shared prosperity. This watershed moment is our chance to turn the key and open this door of opportunity. We can make progress in addressing the triple global threats and liberate ourselves from the shame of past failures of multilateralism. At this watershed moment, we must not only choose, but also act decisively to bequeath our children and their children a greener, safer, healthier, and more abundant earth. Let us do it together, inclusively, multilaterally. I thank you.
Au nom de l'Assemblée,
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Defence Forces of the Republic of Kenya for his statement, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Ali Bongo Ondimba, President of the Gabonese Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
au nom
On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Ali Bongo Ondimba, President of the Gabonese